Oh my gosh, this is such a hilarious story, flagged by Matt Brunig. Let's put it up there on the screen. So, the New York Times wrote this incredible nonsense story about, quote, why some companies are saying diversity and belonging instead of diversity and inclusion. He says, incredible stuff. Businesses are finding out that DEI consultants they hire are running programs that create even more identity based hostility and are responding by hiring other DEI consultants who market themselves as not doing that. As he says, quote, all of this is fake. Now, the reason why this is hilarious is that you basically have the new religion of DEI inside of every Fortune 500 company in America and have now basically for the last couple of years, especially ramping up after the George Floyd protests. People thought that they were doing the right thing. They said, oh, we're going to eliminate racism by hiring D&I consultants. However, all evidence that we currently have, Krystal, all evidence, as evidenced by this New York Times article, is that saying the quote diversity and inclusion and emphasizing the place of race, quote unquote, implicit bias, quote unquote, quote unquote, like microaggressions or macroaggressions in some cases are actually increasing hostility in the workplace, racist thoughts, and are having the opposite intended effect. Now, and also, do any of these people work? I have no idea why aerospace engineers are subjected to raise your hand whenever you had a racist thought literally at work. Sounds like something you should do on your own time. Now, what's fascinating to me is that the corporations are beginning to wake up to this. I personally thought that they would never move on, but they're doing it in the best way possible, moving from diversity and inclusion to diversity and belonging, ditching some implicit bias training to still spend the same amount of money on, quote, diversity, but hiring somebody whose recommendation is stop doing the previous training and is reverting back to do nothing. So in effect, this has all become a giant money laundering scheme. Matt Taibbi had that great piece, I think it was 2 years ago, about, what was her name? White Fragility. The
Robin
book,
DiAngelo,
Robin
that lady.
DiAngelo. And,
I mean,
some of these ladies who are out there making Ibrahim Kendi making millions of dollars charging these places to give them lectures and to teach their babies anti-racism and all this stuff. And instead, it's actually making people not only more racist, there's actually no evidence. A, it's not changing anything on racism. So congratulations. And B, like they are basically just bilking Fortune 500 companies to check a box when they can go to Wall Street and say, see, we have all of our employees undergoing diversity and inclusion. And meanwhile, you have employees, I can't tell you the amount of people I know who are subjected to these things, who it enrages them to their core. A, they're being taken away from whatever they're supposed to be doing. And B, they're like, I don't even agree with this. And you're basically shoving this down my throat and you're making me angrier about this problem, which I didn't even think was a problem in the first place.
The research has long been in that if you actually care about combating racism, which I do, this diversity and inclusion consultant grift complex is fake. Right. It doesn't work. If anything, it makes things worse, according to a bunch of data that they have in the New York Times. But you gotta love that the solution to that is like, well, let's hire a different class of consulting grifters who are going to pretend to, so we can still have our virtue signaling box checking exercise that we can, put on our website or whatever to show how wonderful and how virtuous we are, even though we have changed none of our internal structures to actually deal with like the root causes of this problem. I mean, you could be spending this money on giving people bonuses and raises.
You want to solve
quality
racism?
Of life better.
Give everybody a raise, especially the most working class people at your company. Take all of that money, give it as a bonus to all of your employees.
Correct.
And the portion of them who are minorities will now do better.
Correct.
Congratulations.
There were a couple things that were mentioned in here that I was like, oh, you know what, that actually is a better idea. So for example, one company was going to open a new location or headquarters in Denver, which is overwhelmingly white. They're like, let's go to Atlanta. And that'll just like naturally help us attract graduates. There's more diversity in the city of Atlanta. I was like, okay, well, that's like actually a thing that makes some kind of sense. But hiring a different group of fake racist, racism consultants to fix the problems that the other group of grifter racism consultants created, this is just total insanity. And the part about the New York Times article that was funny to me was you know, they use these anecdotes of, they very credulously report on the new class of consultants that, okay, this is really going to be the solution. Now they've got it. Now they've really got the solution. And they interview like a couple people who are like, yeah, this was great. We loved it. And that substitutes in for any sort of like evidence or evidence-based research that the new class of consultants is going to be better than the old class.
You know, I will say that I had a massive flag go up whenever they say that the reason they switched from Denver to Atlanta, because I also know that Governor Brian Kemp and the Georgia State Legislature are throwing money at companies that are coming to Georgia. So I was like, are you really going because you want more black engineering graduates, or are you maybe going because you're going to get more money by switching there? So I'm just personally suspect of basically anything that these people say. I think that the best way to do it is like what we just said, you know, give people a raise and hire people based on merit. And then when we have education, make it so you have merit-based admissions so that everybody knows that whoever is there regardless of whatever, you know, is there because they are the best person for the job. That's how we hire here. That's how most people should hire. And in general, like spending your time is the most precious asset that you have. When you ask people why they want money, it's because they want to be able to control their time. So involuntarily subjecting people to things that don't work. And when we're saying this, I'm not talking, you know, out of nothing. Put this up there on the screen. This is just like one of a slew from Scientific American, the problem with implicit bias training, an insane amount of evidence-based research to show that implicit bias training has either no effect or the opposite effect intended when subjected to tens of thousands of people who have been forced now to go through these programs. So it has not had the intended effect. It is a societal problem that apparently we're trying to solve through like some corporation. It's not Microsoft.
Corporate training.
Microsoft's job is to make money. Our job is to make sure that they pay people enough money and pay their taxes while they're doing so. The rest of this, leave it to us. Leave it to the government. Leave it to the news. Leave it to churches or bowling leagues or, you know, any of these places. Leave it to your friend group where you can sit and talk and be like, hey, what's going on with this George Floyd thing, man? Be like, yeah, well, I kind of disagree what's going on in the news. Well, I hadn't thought about that before. And actually, I was listening to the show and they said this, and I read this piece in National Review, but I read this piece in The Nation. You sit down and you talk. That's called society. This is not the way that these problems are supposed to be worked out.
I mean, listen, you're responsible for your corporate culture, and Lord knows there is a lot of like sex and race and religion-based discrimination that still exists within these companies that they are wholly responsible for rooting out. But the idea that you're going to solve a deeply entrenched problem like racism at the corporate training level is farcical.
That's what I'm getting to.
And when you know, we know what has worked over time in terms of closing the wealth gap, closing the wage gap, especially among Black Americans who have historically been treated as this, you know, horrifically abused underclass. And it has been universal programs that have lifted the minimum wage for all people, that have helped improve the plight of all working class people. Why? Because in a lot of times race is a proxy for class in America. So when you focus on lifting up, you know, the bottom of society, this is disproportionately impactful for disenfranchised and marginalized groups. That work has to happen at the nationwide level. It has to happen at the government level. It is not going to be solved by Robin DiAngelo getting paid hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars for some bullshit corporate training that doesn't even work and probably makes things worse.
But you're forgetting, though, that it makes people feel better whenever they buy a book called Anti-Racist Baby. That's what we're always forgetting.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.